Why do sauces taste better in restaurants? There's no secret ingredient. The answer is patience and time. I'm going to show you how we make our favorite sauce and why time is actually the most important thing in sauce making. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be showing you how to turn a Demi glace into a really well finished and seasoned and balanced sauce. I'm going to show you how to make red wine sauce that you make in the restaurant. You need to select the right ingredients. You can't just be chucking any old rubbish into a pot and expecting to get a great sauce out of it. This is going to give the main body of the sauce. So we're using 3 types of bone. So we're going to take in the time to select the bones. They're all here for different reasons. So these are just cast feet, which has been split in half. This is going to add the gelatin and the body and help to add viscosity to the sauce. We've got some beef bones. And then the third bone we've got is chicken wings. Chicken wings are great for adding that sort of beautiful roasted dark caramelization flavor. They also add really good amounts of gelatin and collagen as well. If you've got a good butcher around you, you should be able to get all of these things from your butcher. They're not waste products, but they're things that are quite often in abundance. So we can pop these into our oven. So this is going to roast at 190. We're next going to prepare all our vegetables for the stock. So we're going to peel the onions, peel the carrots, give them a nice wash. Too often people just put in for the veg for sauces, people might just throw in like odds and sods from around the place, which definitely has a time and a place. Guaranteed, 100%. Like if I'm at home and I've got, you know, half an onion knocking around and a bit of like celery which isn't looking too hot, a little bit of mushrooms, etc., etc., I'm going to use it in a stock or a sauce that I'm making at home. But this video is all about how to make the perfect sauce and why sauces taste better in restaurants. In a classical French kitchen, the saucier is actually one of the most prestigious and technically demanding positions within the brigade. The Scoffier was the person that sort of founded this modern day brigade system that we still use today. And traditionally the saucier would be responsible for making all of the sauces, all of the stocks, often the final section that you get to within the professional kitchen. So what this slicer does is it's basically just a slicing blade which cuts everything to 2 millimeters thick. So it's all even sizes, so it's going to caramelize quickly. It's got maximum surface area, so we can extract as much flavour out of the vegetables in the shortest amount of time. I'm sure in most sauce videos or stock videos that you've seen online, quite often the common... Hold that thought. Quite often you just see the onions sort of just like diced, just roughly chopped, bang, straight into the pot. Which again, you'll get a good flavour and it's not necessarily going to ruin the stock or the sauce, but by doing it this way, we're just maximising the flavour extraction. So obviously we're using the machines to speed up some of the prep, but if you're doing this at home, you can just do it all by hand. So mushrooms done, the next step is the garlic. As you can see, the bones are starting to caramelise. And quite often, like, you know, I work with loads of our chefs would then go to take the bones out of the oven like this, because they look nice and golden on the top. But once you get in there and start to flip them, you'll see on the underside of all these bones here, like you can see how pale it is on the underside. There's still obviously plenty of flavour in there, but what we're looking for is we want this beautiful golden roast all over the bone. So taking the time to really roast your bones properly is an absolute non-negotiable. So the last little bit of mise en place we need to get ready for our sauce is the beef trim. And some of it is a lot of the trim that we produce in the restaurant. So from, whether that's from portioning steaks, from butchering down whole carcass, you know, we go through a lot of rumps of beef for our Sunday roast, so you get quite a lot of trimmings that come off of that. So all we're doing is basically going through that trim, and then we're just dicing it into sort of 1-inch square pieces, give or take. Yeah, so beef trim you can easily get from your butcher. If you can't get beef trim, you can go to your supermarket and just look sort of like the cheapest type of beef you can get there. We run the meat section and the sauce section together as one. So all their deliveries come in here. They've got ovens, they've got the brat pan, which we're going to go through in a second when we make this sauce. This is going to add the body and the flavour to our sauce. Predominantly that caramelized, meaty, essencey flavour. So the last thing I added to our mise en place is the wine. And the wine is going to help to release flavours from the other ingredients. Then we've got our vegetables, so we've got the onions and the carrots, which is going to add sweetness and balance. We've got the mushrooms and the garlic, which is going to add depth and umami. We've got our aromats of thyme, bay leaf, parsley stalks, which is going to add aroma. We've got our bones, which is going to add the body and the structure. And finally, the most important part, the water, which is our extraction method. Next step is caramelization. So we've got our bones, which have already been caramelized, as we've already discussed. So what I want to do from these bones is remove the fat from the trays. So we're just going to literally very gently just tilt your tray on an angle and pour off the excess fat that comes off from the roasting. So that's what we're looking for here. Really maximum caramelization on these bones, on all surfaces. It's beautiful, dark golden brown. We're going to be making our sauce using a brat pan. This is just a tool that we use in the restaurant. It's effectively just a big pan. A big square pan. It has it's 100 litres. But if you're doing this at home, you use just a very big pan, effectively. So what we're going to do first step is we're going to get our wine on to reduce. So you can use any sort of wine, really, when you're sauce making. We're actually going to be using wine twice in this. So we're going to be using this wine in the base of the sauce. And then once we've made the sauce and reduced it, we're then going to make a further wine reduction to finish the sauce later on. So we're going to reduce the wine by half. So then we're just going to take some of that fat that we saved from the roasting of our bones, and we're going to place that into the pan. This is pretty much what we used to live off when I was sort of like young chef working on the sauce section, because you'd be down making sauces all day long, chicken wings in the oven, you'd be just eating those all day long. Chef Murray was partial to a roasted chicken wing. So beef's going to go in. So it's going to give it a really good mix round initially. Then we're just going to let it settle, let some of that steam cook off, before we then keep turning it. So this has been roasting now for probably about 10 minutes. So as you can see now, it's starting to brown, but this is exactly what we don't want. So it's pale, it's got some color on the outside, but it's still quite wet. There's some brownness, but it's mostly kind of gray looking. What we're looking to do is, as it starts to color, we'll lower the heat incrementally until all of that beef is beautifully golden. It takes a long time, but it really is one of the main secrets to getting a good flavour in your stock. So we're just going to remove the bits of beef, leaving behind all the fat. So we don't want to remove the fat. So that's been roasting for about 20 minutes. So as you can see now, all that trim is, look at that, absolute filth. Perfectly caramelised. By having this big empty pan now with the residue of the fat inside, you can now see where all that flavour is in the bottom of the pan. So turn it down low, and we're going to go in with our onions. So we're going to put those in first, caramelise them down, and then go in with the carrots afterwards. So they're just going to go straight in, keep it on super low, spread it out evenly so the whole bottom of the pan is covered. And the water that comes out of the veg is going to steam the bottom of the pan and release all of that caramelisation off the bottom of the pan. Now we're going to start to scrape the bottom, and as you can see that bottom layer of onions is nice and brown, and with very little effort, the little scrape, I can lift up all that caramelisation very, very, almost effortlessly. Our onions are really nice and soft. They're just starting to caramelise around the outsides. They're starting to go a little bit brown. So the sweetness is really starting to come out of them now. Those natural sugars are caramelising. So in go our carrots. A fine line with the caramelising in the veg. We do need to be careful, although we're looking for maximum sweetness. If you go too far and the veg starts to burn on the bottom, the sauce can go quite bitter. Once they're nice and soft, the last vegetables we're going to go in with is our mushrooms and our garlic. They don't need much colour, just 5 minutes or so. So now we're going to add back in all of our caramelised ingredients back into the pan all together, ready for step 3, which is the cooking. So our caramelised beef has gone back in. We're then going to go in with our aromats. So we've got here some thyme, some bay leaf, and then our parsley stalk. The smell that comes off it is, honestly, it's like nothing you've ever smelled before in your life. It's so nice, I love it. So our wine is finished reducing, so we can then go in with that into the pan. And then next stage is to add all of our bones. So obviously this pours the water straight in. Holy mackinaw. So most important step here from the cooking process is we're going to start with cold water. Now the reason being is that cold water extraction is slower. This allows the collagen to dissolve slowly, and this improves the body and the clarity of the sauce. Now you want just enough water to cover the bones. Any extra water is just going to be wasted. You're just going to spend more time reducing it and you're not going to get any improved flavour. As the stock boils, the convection currents increase and the fat and the impurities will be boiling into the sauce through that convection of the rolling boil. So we really want the sauce to simmer at as gentle heat as possible with a very slow convection current so that minimal amount of fat is boiled into the stock. Little bonus tip for you, you're going to use that hot liquid to deglaze the trays that we roasted the bones over. And this is just going to get even more flavour released from the bottom of those trays. So our stock is just about to simmer. You can just sort of start to see it simmering in the middle. So I'm just now going to turn it down, skim off this first raft of impurities. We want enough fat in there, but we want the good fat that's going to add flavour. You want a long, slow cook so that all that collagen breaks down and you're getting the maximum yield of flavour out of it. But there is a fine line, not necessarily always longer is better. 3 to 4 hours is sort of good. So once the stock has been boiling for 3 hours, you want to turn it off and leave it for at least half an hour. And what this is going to do is it's going to let the bones and the vegetables relax, and they're going to release when they go through the cooking process. They're going to soak up a load of moisture. When they turn off and relax, they're going to release all that liquid out. So we want the maximum juices and flavour out of all those ingredients. We want to leave them for 30 to 45 minutes. I'm bringing in a numbnut to help me pass this on. Jesus Christ. Or if you're doing this at home, you'd obviously a much smaller scale, so it'd be quite a lot easier. But you could effectively just, with a slotted spoon, remove the bones out onto a colander. And I would remove all of the bones by hand, and then through a colander, leave it to sit over a bowl, and then take the rest of the stock and pass it through a fine strainer into a clean pan, and then let the bones sit inside that colander for 10-15 minutes. And then once all the juice is taken out, discard the bones and then pour whatever was left in the bowl underneath the bones through the fine sieve as well, and then you can chill down that stock. This is now ready to go into the fridge overnight, and we're going to pull it out tomorrow and remove the fat, ready to reduce. So this is what our stock is going to look like after being in the fridge overnight. Without a doubt, the most effective way to remove the fat from your stock and get beautiful clarity on your finished sauce. When we come to finishing our sauce later on, you're going to get such a beautiful clarity and finish in your sauce and clear viscosity to your finished product by removing this fat now before we go on to the reduction phase. Now we're just going to pass it through a shimmer again, or a shimmer or a fine sieve, just so we can make sure we get rid of any of these other little fat particles that are floating around in there. You need to obsess over the minute details in sauce making. And I think what you'll see over the progression of all these points that we've shown with the sauce making, it's not about one singular point. It's not about pass this out and your sauce will be great. It's all of these points together, the caramelisation of the veg, the dicing of the beef, the roasting of the bones, the removal of the fat, all of these little points are all going to add to your finished sauce. So this takes us on to step 4, which is the reduction. Now, many restaurant sauces are reduced slowly, and what this does is it concentrates the flavours, it thickens the sauce naturally, and creates depth and richness within the sauce. So we're starting off in a large pan, we're starting off on a high heat. As the stock comes to a simmer, we want a nice slow rolling boil for exactly the same reasons when we were making the first boiled stock. We don't want any fat that's remaining to boil in there, but because we removed so much, we can keep it on a slightly higher heat. We're going to be using a sauce skimmer or oil skimmer set inside a nice container of clean water, and as the stock reduces, turning it into the sauce, we're just going to keep skimming off any fat that rises to the top. We're going to keep this clean, keep the pan nice and clean, and as the stock reduces, the sauce is going to become thicker, and as the volume decreases, we will then decrease the size of the pan in line with the amount of sauce in there. We're going to be reducing this by a total of about 85 to 90%. So step 5, finishing a sauce. A skill every chef needs to learn, yet one that very few possess. So I've got my port and my red wine in here. On a super high heat, I'm just going to reduce that down, all the way down to a glaze, basically, to remove all of that alcohol flavour. Want a really intense reduction. which is just going to permeate through our final sauce. Pepper is a very different heat to that of like chili. So what this is going to do is we're going to toast it off, lightly crush it, and then infuse it into the sauce. And it's not going to make it spicy, and it's not going to make it peppery, but what it's going to give you is just a very gentle background heat in the back of your throat, which almost like gives a nice warmth to the sauce. So here you can see the sauce is now finished its reduction. It's beautiful dark golden colour. The clarity in it is incredible. And that comes from that slow reduction process and taking the time to remove all that fat, changing the pan regularly, just really taking your time on every single step of that reduction. You can even look at that, look at it on the spoon, it just looks like liquid gold. So now we're going to let this sauce cool down slightly to 80 degrees before we start to layer our infusions. So this is our red wine reduction, the red wine and the port. So as you can see, that's now reduced down to a glaze. You want to be very careful when it gets to the thick stage because it's almost becomes very sticky and can burn very easily. So I'm going to add the stock to our red wine reduction. So by adding that red wine, that reduced red wine to our Demi Glace, we've now effectively got a red wine sauce. We like to use Dijon mustard, but again, you could finish this with any type of mustard you wanted. The easiest way to add the mustard to avoid it clumping is to make a slurry. You can't just put a set amount of mustard in and go, yeah, I'm done. You need to put some in, taste it. Do you think it's enough? Maybe the recipe, they were quite light on it. Maybe you like a bit more, maybe you like a bit less. Like, you can really tweak it to whatever your taste is. Finally chiffonade the herbs, mix it through the sauce and then leave it to infuse for about 20-25 minutes. The pepper's not going to need to go in for as long as the herbs. The pepper I'm only going to put in for about 5 minutes, less than a handful of black pepper. Next stage is we're going to now pass out those infusions. So I'm going to go in with a few knobs of butter and then we'll just slowly incorporate that in. Too much butter at this stage can ruin it. So you should be able to see once you add the butter, as soon as you add it, you can almost see the fat just licking off the outside of the butter and starting to emulsify with the sauce. We always add vinegar and acidity to the sauce at the end. Here we're going to use a combination of Cabernet Sauvignon red wine vinegar and then also a touch of lemon juice. They're going to add slightly different types of acidity. Obviously the lemon is a much more fresher, a citrusy vibe. So salt and sugar might have a sauce which you didn't caramelize the veg as much, and then you might want to season it with a touch of sugar just to enhance the sweetness. Sometimes people are afraid of adding salt to a sauce. But you have to remember, at the end of the day, this is a meat-based sauce. And you never think about cooking a steak without seasoning it. So it's a weird thought to think, why would you make a sauce without seasoning it as well? It's a similar process, but quite often people forget to add salt to it, and it can really change the flavor. Now, it might sound strange at first, but the last thing you're going to use to season this sauce is water. The reduction process is very hard to gauge. And also you have to imagine when you taste the sauce or when you eat a sauce, you're never eating it at 100 degrees. So when you're tasting a sauce as it's reducing, you have to then imagine that sauce is going to cool slightly when you eat it. Because once you've made your sauce, you've served it, you've poured it onto a plate, you're then eating it 3, 4, 5 minutes later. That sauce is considerably colder than when it was reducing. So quite often the sauce can be quite thick and it can almost coat your mouth a little bit too much. By adding water, it can really open it up. It's good. So I just put in our finished sauce alongside a nice steak, perfect accompaniment for a beautiful, rich red wine sauce. Yes, you could buy stock from a supermarket, add some lemon, add some butter, and you'd have a delicious sauce. Of course you would. But applying these tips and steps from this video is how you can elevate your home cooking to restaurant standards.